Awesome. All right. So where we are going to be picking up today is on page 8. And where we're going to be starting is the first full paragraph. And I always like to call this paragraph Bill Wilson's Step One Experience. But just a brief bit of review, a little bit of review, unless Terry's like, I want to do review. I'm good. All righty, we're reviewing. Rock and roll review. Pew pew. All right. So what has happened up until this point? Well, Bill Wilson, he checks, I'm going to do it a quick review. Bill Wilson checks himself into the town's hospital for the first time. And in the hospital, he learns that he's got an allergy of the body. He learns that once he starts to drink, he cannot control the amount that he takes. But more important than that, he learns of the obsession of the mind. He learns that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor. So the willpower that he has in all other areas of his life does nothing in terms of him taking that first drink. So he learns of that and he leaves the hospital and he's like, I got it. I got self-knowledge. I got this thing. It's all good. And so he drinks again because what kicked in for him was the obsession of the mind. Now, in Bill's story, in the story, he goes back to the hospital another time. Now that all the history husbands will correct me, so I got to be on my game, and/or I'm going to make just erroneous statements just to be corrected. But turns out he went to the hospital twice, once in the summer and once in the fall of 1934. But in that last hospitalization there, what happened is he overheard. He overheard that it was going to be fatal. Dr. Silkworth spoke to his wife Lois outside of his room and said, Lois, you got to put him into one of these lunacy bins. You got to throw him into an asylum. He's not going to make it. Or you got to make funeral arrangements. And he overheard that and he knew the hopelessness. And that's where we kick off here in page 8. Now, I did review. Do you want to take the paragraph and then do it that way?
Yeah, sure. Which we're at no words?
No words, but you
No
got
word.
words. Pew
No
pew.
words. No words. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Mm, good paragraph, right? I get no words could really describe a good, well-whooped ass, right? I guess uh, n- there is no words that I could describe to the amount of pain that I went through and turmoil. The more I look at this paragraph, I just kind of see he's just wallowing in self-pity. I think he crossed the line in his drinking a couple pages prior, but here's where he makes an admission. And I guess one of the definitions of admissions means to let in, right? So he's conceding to his innermost self that he met his match. Like overwhelmed means powerless. I've been overwhelmed. I'm powerless. Like this is taking me. I can't control the amount I take when I'm drinking or drugging or gambling or whatever it is. That is your bugaboo, you know. Uh, but also when I'm sober, I can't stay sober. Alcohol was my master, and pages 1 through 8, I said it before, and prior. It was a little spiritual exercise was to see if you drink like Bill, think like Bill, and felt like Bill. All right. And then you're going to answer question, which is a statement. A few statements. Had I met my match? That's a question for us. All right. Had I been overwhelmed? Question mark. By whatever drug of choice that you call. All right. All these pages are trying to pinpoint what did you lose control with? What did you sell your soul to? What did you have a love affair with? Alcohol was my master. I was, part of my language, I was alcohol's bitch, That's what it was. That was what it was at the end at my drinking. I couldn't stay sober for more than 1 hour after I told myself I'm done forever and for good. Now he took step one. You can't really take step one and study step one. It's an experiential step. That's something that brought you in here, you know? And yeah, I think I'm done, Paige. Back to you. Pew pew.
you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Terry. And I love that you're talking about that experiential nature of step one. And that is my experience. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair. And some of you guys know I like to big book bounce around. And I have this whole big book bounce around that I do that's on the topic of loneliness and tying the threads of loneliness through this book. The thing about loneliness is I think loneliness means that I'm missing people. I'm disconnected from you. But my experience is that loneliness is instead a profound experience of the sense of separateness from God. That's what loneliness is. And if you guys have, and I'm sorry for those that are like sick of hearing me say this, but it's like, man, I don't know about you, but I felt utterly, absolutely lonely and alone in a stadium full of people. I could come to the rooms at 12 Step and I could sit in a room with people like you and still feel absolutely, utterly lonely and alone. And you see, I don't know about you, but for somebody like me, I can feel absolutely, utterly lonely and alone in the middle of a relationship. And I don't know about you, but I can feel absolutely, utterly lonely and alone in the middle of an act of intimacy. And it has nothing to do for me with a sense of separateness from others. It for me is a sense of separateness from God. I know that to be true because as we start to approach the fifth step promises, it talks about how I can be alone at perfect peace and ease, which tells me it's about the conscious sense of separateness from God and that morass of self-pity, that quicksand stretching around him in all directions. It is for me that step one experience is not simply that I can never safely drink or use drugs ever again. My step one experience is a deep and profound concession that I can never ever safely use any alcohol, drugs, mind-altering substance again, and yet I will. Yet I will. I am doomed to go back to it against my will. And that is that quicksand pulling me under, that hopelessness. And two things. One, I really thought quicksand was going to be a much larger hazard in adulthood. That's what I was led to believe growing up. You know what I mean? When I was a kid, all the shows that are like, here's how you get out of quicksand. Not once I had to use that. Also, just going to throw it out there. I have not used stop, drop, nor roll. Has not happened. Just safety though. Good to have on hand in case you need it, but I'll tell you what my step one experience was. My step one, and I'll be like kind of graphic about what it's not graphic. I'm just going to be direct about what it was. Is I had a couple of crack pipes that I had stored away. And I had pushed the pipes to get that last little bit of crack. And I was in university at the time, and I had just scraped them so I could get that last little bit of crack. It wasn't even less than a 20 piece. And I'm scraping it, and I'm sitting there, and I'm flailing like a lady, like a lady flailing. Pinkies were not up, and I was sitting there and I was going to try to do some homework after that because the allergy was on me, but I had nowhere to go. And you know what I mean? And it was just awful. And in that moment, I knew. See, I'm living at home. I'm in university. This isn't the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But I knew that there was nothing in and of myself that I could do that would prevent me from getting to some of the worst places that I ever ended up as a result of my addiction. I knew, and like the visual that I had was in that moment, there was nothing that I could do that was going to stop me from ending back up in front of the Uptown Bottle Depot in Calgary, Alberta, where I would sleep in a shopping cart for it, so that people wouldn't kick our heads in. Like there was nothing that I could do to stop it. And that was my step one experience. And I also want to point out, I was coming into the rooms, and I came into the rooms for myself. But I can lose that experience. I can lose that moment. I'm a kind of a believer that bottom in and of itself isn't a thing. There isn't a magic day, a magic moment where it's like, oh, that was bad enough. I'm done forever. What happens is I burn my life to the ground and I experience enough pain, and I can experience that pain in my addiction, and I can experience it sober. And experience enough pain where a window of willingness opens up, and I'm willing to take actions that I wasn't willing to take. And if I don't take those actions, because for a number of reasons. We're going to talk about that in Bill in just a second. That window will close and I will coast. And if I coast long enough, I'm going to drink again. I'm going to use again. I'm going to relapse into whatever addictive behavior brings you to this all-inclusive study. But this is Bill Wilson's step one experience. He has come to the end of himself. There is nothing. He knows that there is nothing that he can do to put between him and that first drink. He knows that the inevitable, and the inevitable is not just another relapse. That's what I need to understand in step one. Step one is I will drink again. I will use again. I will gamble again. I will call my ex again. I will do it again. But following that is the train of the inevitable death that I will lead. You know what I'm saying? That's like he's there. He sees that. But we're going to see a step one experience by itself is not enough for sobriety. So it says, trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. And so if we look at the cycle, what he's done is he has sworn off. He never wants to do it again. And he is being driven by the fear. And then knowing that he's going to die of this thing and knowing that it's going to bite him and it is going to be awful. And it says, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And if you're writing in your book today, you can make a little note that that is the mental obsession. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Now, if you will indulge me, we're in Bill's story. So I gotta go on a Lois Remembers tangent. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, Lois remembers rock and roll. So I didn't plan to take this long paragraph and then add a. I'll make sure we get you more time. All right. So if you have your copy of Lois, by the way, if you're like, what? I don't have a copy of Lois Remembers. That must be nice to be that well adjusted. But if you have your copy of Lois Remembers, grab a hold of it because we're going to be on page 87. And part of why Lois Remembers is because I have it in arm's reach. But part of why I go on these tangents is to help us see the story behind what happened. And as we go through this story, Lois Remembers, page 87, for all the funky fresh kids that have a copy of Lois Remembers, and you're still funky fresh if you don't have a copy. Let's go to page 87 and let's see the power of this mental obsession. So page 87, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down. It's on page 87, Lois Remembers. So it says, after leaving towns in late September, Bill stayed sober until November 11th, Armistice Day. And it says, as my work prevented me from celebrating with him, I just want to contextualize something. After the First World War, especially in the United States, Armistice Day. In Canada, in the UK, it's November 11th is known as Remembrance Day. And here it's actually quite a somber, a very solemn occasion, remembrance, and so it's a little bit of a tonal shift when it's like celebrating. But to just put it in context, these were veterans of the First World War. And that moment the war ended, it was this big celebration for them. Like, we did it, we won. And so it was a bit of a continuation of that, that we won. It was a celebration to reconnect with old military buddies. Like, that's sort of the context. Because if you're from like Canada or the UK and it's like they were celebrating, like, what? Because that's not totally appropriate, So as my work prevented me from celebrating with him, Bill went to Staten Island by himself to play golf. He didn't lose that golf fever. Ooh, it was on him, When I reached home that evening, he was not there. At 5 o'clock in the morning, after a sleepless night, I found him unconscious, propped up against an iron gate in the basement airway, his head bleeding. Anyone here ever come to like that? After I would regularly go missing. I'm a go missing sort of person. I'd be gone. He found by his wife, 5 a.m., head bleeding. And it goes on to say, Um, it seemed the bus to the golf course had broken down. While waiting for another, he and his seatmate went into a pub. While Bill righteously sipped ginger ale, he carefully explained to his companion why he couldn't drink liquor. So he can't disassociate and isolate on his phone. So, he's like making a friend, and the bus is broken down. They just go into, a pub, get something to eat. He's drinking ginger ale, and he's doing what I like to call the classic alcoholic overshare, where it's like, hey, I just met you. Here's my trauma, like, blah. And I know none of you guys would ever do anything like that. And I want you to know I have that in my head to the tune of Call Me Maybe. So I apologize. Yeah, you guys know it. Yeah. And right. And so he's doing the classic alcoholic overshare. Yeah, and I was in the hospital, and I was in the hospital again. And then they said if I ever drank again, I'm gonna die. And he was making funeral arrangements with my wife, and I got this allergy and I got this obsession, and he is explaining it. I mean, in my mind, Bill Wilson is doing a master class at explaining the illness that is alcoholism. And so it says, so explained why he couldn't drink liquor. Soon the bartender came along and said, "It's Armistice Day. Have one on the house." With visions of the first Armistice Day in France, and without another thought, Bill gulped down the drink. His companion was flabbergasted, saying, "You must be crazy." "Yes," said Bill, "I am crazy." And that is the power of the mental obsession. He's explaining to him that it will ruin his life. And without a second thought, he takes the drink. That is the power of our mental obsession. So back to not Lois Remembers, back to Bill's trudging on in Bill's story, rock and roll. So on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere, or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. I got to get to that place of hopelessness, and that darkness. And it's only when I am in that place of darkness that I'm willing to grab a hold of the light. I'll grab a hold of the hope that's on offer, how dark it is before the dawn. And that's the hope that we have here in the rooms of 12 Step. Is if you're in that place of pain, if you're in that place of darkness, if you're like, man, I don't know if these stupid steps out of this stupid book written in the stupid 1930s could possibly help me. How dark it is before the dawn. And it does not take long for the sun to rise here in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, whatever brings you here. It does not take long to get well. It does not take long for that sun to rise. It does not take long to recover. And it says, in reality, that was to be the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. That fourth dimension of existence is a synonym for the spiritual awakening. And I want to point something out. I'm talking about it didn't take long to get well. We're talking about a catapult. A catapult. Like a trebuchet. And I know they're different, because I know we have some people that would be like, Paige, actually, a trebuchet and a catapult are completely different with the velocity. I know what's up. How dare I? Rude. But the purpose of that is to say with some velocity, with some impetus, quickly, we are launching into that spiritual awakening. And if one of the things that I'm always after is I'm after the sneakies. I'm after the sneaky prayers, the sneaky promises. Yeah, velocity. Sneaky prayers, sneaky promises, sneaky descriptions of a spiritual awakening. And this is what the fourth dimension looks like. This is what the awakened spirit looks like. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life. I always want to emphasize way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So this is not a set it and forget it deal, but that is what a spiritual awakening looks like. Over to you, Terry. Sorry I took so long. Pew, pew, pew.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, and the big book will define words for you if you allow it to, like it did with the word recovered. Same thing with the words fourth dimension. He actually gives us the definition of it right here. I was to know happiness. That's my mind, right? I was to know peace. That's spirit. And I was to know, what is the other one? I was to know usefulness. That's physical or body. Sounds like my triangle, right? Mind, body, spirit, all interlocked together. I like doing that little motion. Interlocked together, interlocked together. And as a result of that is a way of life, which is the fourth dimension, living right here from moment to moment to moment to moment basis. He defines it again on page 25 of the big book. If you want to do a big book bounce around, why not, Page? Let's flip to that page, no pun intended. Go to the what was it? Second paragraph. The great fact is just this and nothing less. We've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life. That's my mind, towards my fellow, that's usefulness, and towards God's universe, that's spirit. Mind, body, and spirit all interlocked together. Page, yet again, interlocked together. And a result of that is the central fact that our lives today, of our lives today, is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way of life, a design for living, a level of life. He's gonna, if you ever see those words throughout the whole entire big book, highlight them, circle them, put little rocket ships right next to them. Right. This is all what we're doing. Even the 12 and 12. What it says is our steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, if practiced as a way of life can expel the obsession to drink and make the individual useful, happy, and whole, right? I butchered it, but you guys get my drift. The whole point is to live from a moment to moment basis with mind, body, and spirit all interlocked together. That is the result of doing the steps. And how dark it is before the dawn, things are going to get pretty dark in sobriety too, you know. Don't let that beat you up. Don't give it any fuel, right? You would be soon catapulted into the fourth dimension of existence once you start doing the work. Right. All right, back to the next paragraph. And Paige did a great job. I mean, step one is making that admission and conceding to my innermost self that I'm alcohol or drug slave, is a great beginning. And you can notice that he had a spiritual experience with that. He had an awakening on step one, right? And it did not keep him sober for long. It said fear sobered him up. Remember we talked about fear being an intuitive sense deep down within you and keep helping you stay separated. But it's going to be blotted out because your mind is going to start talking so loud. And it'll start like a roar. It'll be like a roar in your little head. And it will say, let's go pick up a drink. And he is literally going to start drinking again. All right. So it says, near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. He took step one. You could do step one perfect. Doesn't mean you can't continue to drink. You know, all the steps 2 through 12 treat my powerlessness, my step one conditions. Look at the traditions. 2 through 12 traditions treat the unity, support the unity of tradition one. I mean, so all I could have all the step one experience I could have with. But I need to do the entire 12-step program, not just a one-step program or a two-step program. Marty does a great job talking about two-step, right? I'm gonna need the sandwich, right? I'm gonna need the whole. I don't want to be what is it? A crumb snatcher. I want the whole cake, right? I want the whole damn cake, right? So here we go. It says, with a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about all the house to carry me through the next day, through that night and the next day. My God, this is another reference to page 21. I would wake up madly every single morning searching for the bottle. Like this is another sentence that just popped in my head. Like I had to make sure I was okay in the morning with drinking and drugging to make sure that I wasn't going to go through the DTs or I wasn't going to be dope sick in the morning. Right? Just another sentence that reflects my experience. My wife was at work yet again. Wife, functional alcoholic, living with someone who actually works and you don't, right? I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our table. I would need it before daylight. So, yet again, it's like I can't breathe without alcohol. I couldn't even eat breakfast without it. This was my experience looking at these pages. He took step one. Now it's just he's wallowing in it and he's drinking and because of self-pity, because of remorse, because of guilt, shame, remorse, because of all that stuff. Because he's listening to his thoughts in his head, right? And you mind if I read the next paragraph? Just by case
Go
it
for
says,
it.
my musing means my thinking. So he's just thinking, was interrupted by the telephone. That cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. This is Ebby Thatcher, squiggly lines, pretty important. Maybe pay attention. He was sober. It was years since I could remember of his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that Ebby had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I would drink openly with him. Unmindful, another word for being selfish, right? Selfish of his welfare. I could care less. I thought only about recapturing the spirit of the other days. There was that time we chartered an airplane to complete a jag. I have no doubt Paige is going to tell that fun story. It's a fun story to listen to. It's an A comes of age as well. His coming was an oasis, that dreary desert of futility. The very thing an oasis. Drinkers are like that. I'm thinking about that. He's thinking, sitting in his kitchen or wherever the hell he's at, and here's the phone. Here's the telephone call. What would you think if put yourself in that scenario? What happens if he had caller ID back then? You think he would have picked up that phone? I mean, I'm just wallowing in self-pity. I want to kick my own tail. I'm thinking, not drink solution, drink answer. I'm thinking suicide solution, suicide. I don't want to talk to anyone. And he just randomly picks up the phone, and it's this cheery old voice, right? This dude that drank more than Ebby, partied more than Ebby, was a mad dog like Ebby, and he's got some fun stories, which Paige will tell. I don't know his middle name, by the way. I forgot it. Where is that? There it is. How do you say his middle name again?
Throckmorton. I mean, you could say Throckmorton, but I feel like you can't, and all the history husbands will agree. His middle name must be pronounced Throckmorton.
Oh, back
It's
morning.
accurate.
The most important thing, and here's another spiritual exercise for everyone here. We could study this book all day, but let's practice the words that are in this book. Look in your life, and who is your Ebby? Who is that person who drank more than you, partied more than you, but was sober and like partied hard, but was clean? The next paragraph says his eyes were glowing, fresh skin, right? Like, who was your Ebby? My Ebby, I had a bunch of Ebbies. My first Ebby was the person I heard at a podium said I grew up in institutions. And I was like, oh my God, that was me. I literally think that I'm like terminally unique when I come into here. And then I find out I literally have twins everywhere. I, I am not, right? It's funny because, like, yes, I'm relating to you at the podium, but I'm really not. I'm relating to the condition that drives you, right? I'm relating to the minion in your head, right? We all have it. It says our actor. It doesn't say my actor is self-centered and egocentric. It says our. So we all have this actor inside of our head, right? But Ebby was different. He was sober. And then Paige does a wonderful job with the history. And here's a fun little fun fact about Ebby Thatcher and his fun escapades with airplanes.
Awesome. Absolutely. And so, like, I'll tell you my experience with this paragraph because I would come up against. Now, I also will say I got sober in November because I am a bleak November baby. I couldn't wait till December like Bill did. It was like, oh, we bet is bad. Um, but I when I first approached this book, especially this, part in Bill's story, I'm like, you chartered an airplane to complete a jag? Okay, like, look at Bill, like Fancy Pants McGee over here thinks he's something special. I'm like, I can't relate to this guy at all. And I was looking for all the ways I was different, all the ways I wasn't like him, all the ways we are not the same. But let's go have a read about that airplane jag. So if you have your trusty, they should have a pocket guide Lois remembers so that you can pull it out anywhere in social situations, hiking, family dinner, pull out your copy of Lois Remembers. This is why I don't get invited places. Oh, what was Evie's middle name again? Throckmorton. It's on my hoodie. Hold on. Throckmorton. I'll put my Evie Thatcher little design that I got in the chat in a little bit. That is the correct pronunciation, Ebby Throckmorton. Such use for money, All right. So Lois Remembers. Page 76, very bottom paragraph. If you have it to hand, and please don't feel like you need a copy of it. It's literally just me having ADHD and taking you guys along for the ride. So thanks for coming. Alrighty. So whenever his work took him near Albany, 76, bottom paragraph, Bill would stop in to see his old friend Ebby, and they always got drunk together. So old drinking buddy. On one of these sprees, a brilliant idea hit them. Ebby had heard that a new airfield was about to be opened by the Equinox House in Manchester, Vermont. So there's going to be a brand new airport. Oh, it's exciting. It says they hired a plane, wired the time of arrival to Miss Orvis, the owner of the hotel, and stocked up well for the flight. Now, I'm going to be very literal at what stocked up well for the flight means. That doesn't mean they remembered to bring their neck pillow and their, and brought all their, like peanuts and snacks. No. Stocked up well for the flight. They got all the booze they would need. I don't think it'd be a long flight, but they're ready to go. Woo! And so let's set the scene. It was a gala day for Manchester. Like a super-de-duper important day for the whole city. Let's see how this goes. It says, Miss Orvis called out the band to greet the first plane to arrive at the new airport. Uh-oh, they've got a band. And I want you to know I am imagining that there is tubas. There's not a world in my mind where there's not tubas at this thing. I don't, if any of the history husbands have, like we got like the cymbals, accordions. I don't need to know there wasn't a tuba. Let me live in that like AA myth. Let me live there. Don't correct me on that. All right. Miss Orvis called out the band to greet the first plane to arrive at the new airport. And the town fathers all gathered at the airfield. The town fathers would be the people of importance, like the mayor, the important politicians, anyone who's anyone. And it says, the plane flew in. The band played lustily. The welcoming committee got ready, and Bill and Ebby stepped down from the plane and fell flat on their faces, dead drunk. Now, does that seem a little more familiar for any of us? Maybe I didn't ruin the gala day for Manchester, Vermont, but I've ruined some family events, I've ruined that sort of thing. Showed up drunk. Like that, oh man, my pause there was like, oh, I'm having a memory. Oh, that was not a good memory. Yeah. Just, so that's something I can relate to. And so what is Bill Wilson doing on bottom of page 8, top of page 9 with Ebby Thatcher? Well, what Bill is doing is Bill is qualifying Ebby Throckmorton Thatcher as an alcoholic. He is trying to do in one paragraph what Bill Wilson was taking 8 pages to do, to qualify him, that he is an alcoholic just like Bill. And that's why when he was sober is in italics. We're making note of that because it's like, ooh, there's something about this. You know what I'm saying? There's something remarkable about this. And I love that it says, I can't even remember when he came into New York in this condition, the condition of sobriety. It's like, Bill, he's sober in New York, like wild. And then it says, rumor had it. And then that's another little earworm that's going to be stuck in my head. Rumor had it. And that's the only thing that I know from that song, which I apologize for ruining your day with that too. But when it talks about how he had been committed for alcoholic insanity, and then it's like, I wondered how he escaped. This is the visual that comes to my mind. I imagine Bill Wilson like imagining Abby Thatcher, ripping off the sheets on his bed and like tying them together to like shimmy down the window. That's the visual I have. Not how, boy, I wonder how our homeboy Throckmorton successfully completed his treatment center program and is well adjusted to his new life of sobriety. No, like escaped. And he probably did literally mean like got out of that jam, like got out of that predicament. But I love that. And I want to point something out on page 8. And in his step one experience, he's got that like dreary desert of futility experience. He's being drowned in the sand of the hopelessness. And on page 9, his old drinking buddy is like an oasis in the desert. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like Cinderella. Yeah, it's like a Cinderella, but with the bed sheets instead of his hair. He had hair. He had a good set of hair on him. But anywho, focus. Focus for me, not for you guys. Don't have to focus. I'm supposed to, sort of. I got some leeway at this one. But that idea that like that hopelessness, that dreary desert of futility, there is no way out. And there's that little bit of hope of an old drinking buddy. Maybe we can just tear one off again and just have a few moments of like, oh, that's what it was like. Can we relate to that? All right, so the next paragraph says the door opened and he stood there, fresh skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? There was a light on in his eyes. There was a glow in his spirit. And the most incredible thing, my homeboy, Ebby Thatcher. He doesn't have to be your homeboy, but he's my homeboy. But I mean, he's all our homeboys, isn't he? You can decide. Rob's like, he's not my favorite homeboy. That's okay. Uh, but it's that idea that like he has showed up and he has carried a message and he has not even opened his mouth. Do you know what I mean? And when we get to page 18, we're gonna talk about what I like to call and what they call it in Ontario. What up, Ontario? The sponsorship contract. That idea of this is how I need to show up to work with others. And one of my favorite lines is that his deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. And I want to point something out. Abby Thatcher, he has not opened his mouth, and yet his deportment has shouted that there is something different about who he is. Yeah, do you want to take it from there, Terry? I felt like I was going on a little long, so over to you. Pew pew.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't say anything, but he knew something was different. It was funny. I was on what was it? Was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago. We had a flooding here, and we go take care of the highways. And I was driving, the one driving all day long. I don't know why this came into my head, but why not tell the story? I'm driving all day long, about 12 hours, looking for flood waters and stuff like that. We found two or three, jumped in, took care of it, blah, blah. And then after the day was done, my buddy was like, Terry, thank you. And I'm like, thank you for what? I was just doing nothing. He's like, no, no, no. And then the other guy's like, oh, he was driving all day. Thank you for driving. He's like, no, no, no. Thank you for bringing joy and enthusiasm all day. And I didn't really wasn't saying anything. I was just having fun all throughout the day, right? And who is your Ebby? Back then, like who is that someone that just brings the joy? Who's a joy bringer? Bringing that enthusiasm, bringing that being a walking demonstration of what it looks like to have a spiritual experience, being a demonstration of a spiritual awakening. Someone who literally was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and had something different about him. We all know who our Ebby was, and reflect back on it because you could be someone's Ebby too, right? And yet again, don't stop telling your story. You never know who you're gonna help, right? And fresh skin and glowing. First time I came back to New York, I went back into the gym business. I shouldn't have done it, but I did it anyway. And then stopped by my gym to actually work out, and the former general manager who I used to be coworkers with, and I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. He's like, dude, what's up with you? What's up with your eyes? You know? My wife and I, we did a talk the other day, which was kind of fun, Paige. I was like, oh my God, what is she? I was nervous. I was like, what is she gonna say? And I talked about my experience with seeing her at the airport and how I felt. You know, usually when I do my third step prayer, I go to that secret place, that moment, that experience that you know the power of God was there, right? And I go there, we both standing each other. I saw her, she saw me, our eyes locked, and I felt the power of God in that moment. I go there when I do that prayer, and X, Y, and Z. And I told that story, and then she started to say, "That was the first time I've ever seen your eyes, Terry. I didn't know what color your eyes were." Right. And I've been with my wife, and she's known me since middle school, right? But I've been with her for 14 years prior to going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I love it. She's fun. Like we've been married for 8, but she tells everybody it was 7 because I went crazy for a year. Right. Yeah. But who is your Ebby? Right. And I pushed that drink across the table. He refused it. It's like disappointed, but curious. Like, "Yo, what's up?" I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. What's all this BS about? That's what it used to say. You could ask the history husbands, right? I queried. He looked straight at me simply but smilingly said, "I've got religion." Now, and he says I was aghast, right? And Bill and then goes through the next 3 pages about his agnostic temperament or his agnosticism, right? He's the God of reason is literally talking the next 2, 3 pages about how does he think about God. And all of a sudden he's like, time out, time out. Like this guy was supposed to be locked up for alcoholic insanity, right? Hold on, time out. This guy was supposed to be, you know, supposed to be, what does it say up here? Uh, I don't know. I mean, this guy was drank more than me, right? Like time out. Like what's up with him, right? This is the it cracked open that idea, the step 2 idea. We are making a transition into step 2 now where possibly something out there, power grid in ourselves, is working. And I can't really explain it, but I could see it in you. I could see it in you. And I said this before, you boil this whole program down to just one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And because of that, we'll talk about his agnostic temperament in a bit. But think about it, like he was so pissed off when he heard the word religion he went on a tangent. Tangents Anonymous, right? 3 pages, right? But then later he's like, hold on, like maybe this people with religion, there's something going on there. Maybe there is some type of power out there. Maybe I could believe in a power greater than myself. The word maybe, right? That's it. Step 2 is not about believing. It's about looking at our agnostic temperament, our agnosticism. You will come to believe when we get to step 10, right? You will have that faith. It says your consciousness or your awareness is sure to come to you if you have a simple attitude, right? If you lay aside everything you think you know, actually sweep away everything you think you see with clarity, you think honestly, and you search diligently within yourself with that attitude, you can't fail, right? And Bill is so desperate. He's drinking right now. I know they were arguing, right? We could go into the history about what was going on, right? And when we get to choose your own conception of God, right? It wasn't as simple as that. Paige and the history husbands could give us more clarification on that, right? But he's drinking and he has a spiritual experience while drinking. Don't underestimate the power of God. I was separated when I was drinking. Man, I was drinking and it wasn't even working. Right? That was my experience at the end. The power of God, don't underestimate it. That's why I don't count people out anymore. I used to. I'm like, they're never gonna get it. Their tush is gone forever. You know, I'm being politically correct. I mean, nothing's gonna help them stop. And I've seen them recreate their lives in front of me, and it wasn't because of me, and it wasn't because of the fellowship, it wasn't because of their sponsor, it was because the power of God broke all those barriers down, and there's that little crack of willingness, right? Don't underestimate the power of God. And we're going to literally look at how do I think about God? I used to write on the top of these pages, page 9, page 11, no, I'm sorry, 10. 11 and the top of page 12, they say, how do I think about God? Key word is the word think. We're going to look at we agnostics and all the references to thinking, like ideas and intellect, intelligence, all this stuff. We're going to be looking at what the story is going on in your head, because the conception or the ideas that are floating up there are not the conceptions and ideas that are going to help you stay sober. Yeah, I had someone say the guy that you're coming in here with is not the God that's going to help you stay sober, Terry, which is very true because I had a concept of God, right? But we're talking about the experiential God. We're talking about this God that's within you, right? We're going to be, and when we go through the next 8 pages, we're going to go through the three sides of the triangle, which I'll show you guys. This is the program of recovery, and I highly recommend that all of you guys see that what Bill did. Be like, and you come across something that he did that, you know what, I don't really feel like doing that. That's kind of scary. Highlight it, underline it, right? And what you're gonna do is create a prayer for the willingness to do what Bill did, right? Because this is the program of recovery. He's gonna outline it for us. All right, Paige, back to you. Pew pew pew, and tell us some fun stories in history.
Absolutely. Pew pew. And so I just love that idea where, so Abby Thatcher, Throckmorton, he's showing up as a living demonstration of this power. And his demonstration is what gets Bill Wilson to be curious. When he says, come, what's all this about? I query, right? My job, I talk about this like, well, Terry and I, we both, because we were at a conference where we're talking about miraculous demonstrations. I'm called to be a demonstration of this power. And that demonstration that Ebby Thatcher was in that moment got him to ask, come, what's all this about? A query. And I love when it says, he looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. And what he was talking about there was the Oxford group, because he had gotten involved in the Oxford group. And when we get to that bottom paragraph on page 9, I'm going to break it down. And I just want to talk about this where it's like, so Bill Wilson, just the context, Bill Wilson, page 8, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair that I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. Alcohol was my master. He is living in the dreary desert of futility, just trying to drink away, even though a little like Terry, it's not working like how it used to. His drinking buddies there, he's just grasping for a couple moments of relief before he inevitably dies of this illness. He is as beaten and broken as only the dying can be. And this is his response to I've Got Religion. It is, I was aghast. Aghast is like, ugh, like, ew. I mean, he didn't turn into a teenage girl that was like, ew, you can't sit with us. You've got religion, ew, gross. But it's like that sort of like, oh, shock and disgust. And when it says, so that was it, last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. And what we're watching is Bill Wilson close to this idea of a power greater than himself. He's closed right up, absolutely. And how often have I done that? How often have I come to the rooms and then I see people like me? Like, I'll be honest, I would have been, if you're annoyed by me, fair enough. But I would have been so annoyed by me when I got here. Like I was miserable, and somebody that was like happy and full of enthusiasm, and like somebody like Terry that was like carrying this message with depth and weight. Man, I was so insecure, so desperately insecure. I thought I sucked, and I just thought they were better than me. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how I showed up. And how often have I dismissed the miracle that is before me? And also the takeaway from this tangent. Well, it's not a tangent because I'm talking on the thing. The takeaway though is that if you're annoyed by me, That's a you problem, not a me problem, because it's reflective of your spiritual condition. So, also, what that means is I'll help you write inventory on me. Believe me, I've helped people write inventory on me. All right. And then if it's cool, I'll just take the next paragraph real, actually, maybe, because we got like 7 minutes left. Now I'll give you the next paragraph and then I'll go into some more history if you want. Or do you actually want me to take it because you're a little busy at the moment?
Oh, I got it.
You
He's
got it.
he's being docile right now. Say hi to him. Hey, buddy. I said, but he did no ranting. Right? This is good. This is good sponsorship too. It's a good sponsorship paragraph in a matter of fact way, which is take it or leave it. Told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They told him a simple religious idea. That's step two. That God could and would if he were sought. You know, if you come across someone, and I recommend you vet them, get to know their behaviors, their religious leanings, uh, learn it from their family members and stuff like that. I told you my experience with someone who was molested by a priest, and thank God I didn't talk about God in the beginning. I talked about my story because what happens if I talked about God? He would have thought right to that situation with the priest, right? And when you see the word religion, if you have someone who is extremely antagonistic about God, change the word to spiritual. Simple spiritual idea. Now, you don't need to do that. I just do that based on who I'm working with, based on what's going on. I'm meeting them where they're at, right? I'll beat the poop out of them in step one. That, that means I'll be working through the book, really with focusing on step one to have an idea or have their mind be cracked open for step two. So simple spiritual idea, a simple religious idea, step two, and a practical program of action, steps 3 through 12. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. Exclamation point. I used to put my sobriety date in there. I used to put my what I would call my permanent sobriety date in there. Put your sobriety date there. Right. Now, every 2 months sober, didn't stay sober, right? But if he didn't drink, and if what's his name, Hank Parkhurst didn't drink, those would be probably our founding fathers, right? That's just my opinion. Take it or leave it, right? But it doesn't need to take you long to have a spiritual awakening. Bill had it on step one. Bill had it on step two. Bill had it on step three, four. I'm saying it I was awakened little bit by little bit. I was awakened just by going. I mean, think about it. I mean, whoever's new here, you're on a book study on a Friday night at 8 o'clock. You're all reading a book together at 8 o'clock on a Friday. That's doing something different with your life that you weren't doing before. That is called a beginning of a spiritual experience, a personality change, which is sufficient to recover from alcoholism, right? But you don't need to delay freedom. You don't need to delay happiness. If your butt is on fire, just like Billy was, you will do this practical program of action, and your belief or your consciousness or your awareness is going to come to you. You're going to have a profound and revelatory experience when you let go absolutely and you do the things that you really don't want to do. A practical program of action, not just thinking, right? Not just wishful thinking stuff. I've tried to actually wishful think my way through the steps. It didn't work. I tried to imagine what it would look like to do the fourth step. I tried blah, 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 right? Have these beautiful stories in my head about making amends, right? And they did not go the way that I thought they would go. They were 9 out of 10 times the unexpected happens. Yeah, more like 10 out of 10, right? Because I was expecting something to happen and it was completely different from the story that was going on in my head. And I was rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. Right? You will have that, put your sobriety date there, protect that date, right? And do what you need to do to protect that date. We're on the same team, but who's in the game? Like I'm in the game because of my step one experience, like Bill was. My step one experience, very similar to Bill, has motivated me to continue doing this work. Right, because we're going to get to page 17 with this thing called a cement, right? Our common solution, our common problem. This is our foundation, right? Sooner or later, your beautiful arch that you walk through as a free person is going to come crumbling down, right? But below that is an unshakable foundation for life, right? And it's my step one experience that includes that. It comes down to me either doing the work or drinking again, which is pretty much I tried that option three stuff for a long time. And sobriety didn't it didn't work. I went back to those moments that Bill was flooding in self-pity, wallowing in self-pity, quicksand, all that stuff in sobriety. You're sitting here, and you have unfinished amends. You have some thing that you left out in your fifth step that you didn't want to tell anyone that you're going to take it to the grave. You're dealing with money and sex issues, right? Most likely you will probably have a lapse or you will have a slip because of that. Right? Unfortunately, there's people that will not, cannot, or will not let go to this program. It's not easy because you're going up against the strongest thing. It says power. What does it say? Cunning, baffling, and power. You're going up against your own mind. Bill's going to describe his mind and what he's thinking about for the next 3 pages. Right? Very powerful stuff. If I continue listening to that, I'm going to believe it. And then I'll take action on it and I'll go back and drink. But Ebby Thatcher, thank God he didn't have caller ID back then. Right? Think about it. This moment in time was sold in by God, and he picked up that phone and he saw someone, and it was his Ebby that changed him. I think he still continued to call him his sponsor, even though he was drinking, right? Yeah. Like, he's still my sponsor. I know he's drinking, he's still my sponsor. Think about the power in that. He's drinking now, and he's having a revelatory experience. And I really want to listen to the about him shooting up a house, so shooting up some ungrateful pigeons. So tell us about.
Absolutely. Pew pew. All right. And so when it said, so this paragraph is the point where Bill Wilson has the vital three pieces of information that I need to know in order to achieve sobriety. So we got the first piece of that information, what his problem was, the obsession of the mind, the allergy of the body, as well as in this moment, the solution, which is that simple religious idea, as Harry was saying, step two, God is bigger than alcoholism. Higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, bigger than alcoholism, and a practical program of action. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little screen share, and I'm gonna tie it all together a little bit. So in this moment, the little star that's at the bottom, this is Bill Wilson, page 9. These three pieces of information came together. We see on page 7 that Bill Wilson met with Dr. Silkworth and learned of the physical allergy, the mental obsession. He learned of the hopeless nature of his alcoholism. But how did this come together? Well, when it says how 2 men had appeared in court, it was actually 3. So I'll tell the story, and I'll do it quickly because I know we're over time. So we got page 26, a certain American businessman. This is our guy, Roland Hazard the third, because he's a fancy pants McGee over here. So Roland Hazard, he came from an incredibly wealthy family, but could not seem to find a way to get sober. He then works intensively with Dr. Carl Jung and drinks again. He goes back and he says, dude, what the heck? Do you know how much I paid you? Why'd I drink again? What's up with that, my guy? And Dr. Carl Jung says, dude, because that's how they spoke back then. I'm sorry I misdiagnosed you. You are an alcoholic. And you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, and people like you do not get well. The only hope there is for people like you is to have a vital spiritual awakening, vital spiritual experience, vital religious experience. And that is our solution. And in whatever 12-step group I am part of, is a spiritual awakening. And Roland Hazard, armed with that as the knowledge of what I need to do in order to get well, he's like, where am I going to find it? And what was growing in popularity at that time was a group that was known as the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group had nothing really to do with alcoholism or drug addiction. The whole thrust of what they were about was about having this deep experience of the God of their understanding and living this way of life where they had an experience of this higher power, of the higher power of their understanding. See, they were religious, they were a Christian group. And, Roland Hazard hears about this Oxford Group stuff, and he's like, oh, I need one of them. And the Oxford Group had a series of actions that anybody could take that later became our 12 steps. Now, Roland Hazard gets involved in the Oxford Group, gets involved with this course of action, and to his surprise, he stays sober. And what happens is he goes to summer in Vermont, because this is, upper class of Vermont, where these guys are hanging out. And our homeboy, Ebby Thatcher, he was getting into some trouble. Now, I know none of you guys would have ever done something like this, but our homeboy, Ebby Thatcher, what he did a couple things, and he was looking at a third strike. One of the first things he did was he was drinking and driving, which is not cool, but he was doing that. I'm sure some of us can relate. And then in rural Vermont in the 1930s, there's not much to hit. Well, he managed to plow his way through an old lady's farmhouse and roll down the window and ask for a cup of coffee, which is not cool in terms of how we manage a DUI. The other thing he did was his family had sent him kind of off. They're like, ooh, he's in trouble. So they sent him off to this house. And if you've ever done that thing where you get a couple beers in you and you start getting a little projecty, he got a DUI, so now he's going to do a DIY. And so he's like, oh, let me do, I'm going to paint this house. You know what I mean? And he gets going. And I don't think, in my mind, this is how I visualize it. The house is like half done, but he's admiring his work. Oh, look at me. I'm so fancy pants. I did so great, and the paintings just turned into more drinking. But some birds began to land, and birds are apt to do what birds are apt to do. And Ebby Thatcher does the only logical, reasonable thing that one could do, which is to get a shotgun and go after the birds. And in my mind, I like to imagine that he just missed, because he's pretty half cut if you're doing that, and just tore off like a strip of the house. Because isn't that what happens when I'm in my cups? I got a solution, but my solution makes it worse. You know what I'm saying? And so he was looking at 6 months in jail. And the week that he was on trial was the week that Ebby Thatcher was hanging out in Vermont, and he was hanging out with some Oxford Group guys. And so it was Roland Hazard. It was a gentleman by the name of Shep Cornell and a gentleman by the name of Seba Graves. Now, if you are here today and you're like, Paige, what is up with Throckmorton? Throckmorton hardly holds a candle to Seba Graves's middle name, which is Quackenbush. Delightful. Quackenbush. Howard knows what's up. Quackenbush. And actually, Seba Graves was an alcoholic, and he was at the time staying sober in the Oxford Group. And he actually got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous a number of years later in the 50s. So it was just a fun little thing. And what had happened? What had happened was, he's looking at this 6-month commitment, and the judge was actually Seba Graves's father. And so there's a little bit of nepotism in this story. But I imagine, he had seen the change in Roland Hazard, and he had seen the change in his son. And again, a call about the powerful demonstration which we are called to be. And he said, okay, only for you. I'll let him go. He's got to be sober on Monday, otherwise he's doing 6 months. And Ebby Thatcher with some impetus. He does not, maybe not even the best motives. I don't think my motives matter as often I think they do. Just to get off his 6-month commitment. He engages in this program of action, knows our solution, program of action, and carries that message to Bill Wilson here on page 9. And we got the 3 pieces of vital information. And just real quick, 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. It does not take long to recover. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening, and it does not take long to help others. I know it's a bit of an awkward place to leave, but why don't we leave it there, because we are 7 minutes over. So I'll stop the recording and we'll wrap up with a prayer.